right, so if I may introduce a friend of mine, I've gotten to know Oliver Gouldsmith from church. Oliver is a Lander student. You all ask me, where are the young people at? I found one. And a budding activist. I think Oliver has an amazing story and an insight and a point of view that we don't often get to hear or experience. So a round of applause again to our friend and new member of our group, Oliver Gouldsmith.
Thank you, Bill.
Make sure you speak good and loud in that microphone.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone. Whoa, not enough? Not enough. There we go. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today. I know it is way too early in the morning to listen to anybody talk about anything, so we appreciate that. Today, I'm here to talk to you guys about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about a little bit about my personal story growing up in Greenwood County. I'm going to talk about what we do at Rainbow Fellowship, a group that I founded about a year ago. And then we're going to talk about the very ironically named Help Not Harm bill making its way through the House right now. So to start off, I grew up in the Matthews Mill Village. We're on Wright Avenue, smack dab in front of the Matthews United Methodist Church. And I spent all of my childhood right there. I would then be the first person in my family to be able to go to college on a traditional track. And I would love to tell y'all that I picked Lander because I did a whole bunch of research about it, but honestly, I didn't want to move because I'd miss my mom. So that's why I chose that. And at Lander, I started specializing in special education. I did not want to be a teacher. And then I just found a real passion with working with kids. I realized that it was a great way to stay connected in my community. And I just grew with it. And Lander is a great place to start advocacy, especially when you realize that advocacy is really just finding issues in your community and trying to fix them, which I have a lot of free time for. So I'm a member of the Call Me Mr. program in the education department at Lander. I also work with the CEC there. I work at Westminster Presbyterian as a nursery worker specializing in our kiddos with special needs, and I'm a residential aide for folks, adults and children with intellectual disabilities. All that to say is I have a wonderful habit of finding jobs that provide me with very little free time and money, but I really enjoy it. I started Rainbow Fellowship about a year ago, a group dedicated to improving the community for our LGBTQ+ individuals, mostly young folks. So my group consists mostly of transgender individuals in the community from Lander University, and we do our best to provide a space for them to gather, chat, share resources, things about HIV prevention, how to change your name, how to find a good doctor, and really how to navigate the very difficult emotional roller coaster that transition can be. And I wish that I could take the credit for being able to locate that issue in our community. But in reality, those are all things that I wish I would have had. So I just created a group for my younger self and for the friends that I knew. As a transgender man in this community, which basically means that I was born a girl, and then at some point I realized that it wasn't going to work. And that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that journey. That started when I was 13. When I was 13 years old, I realized that I really didn't like how long my hair was. And I really didn't like how my name sounded when people said it. And it really, people talk about it a lot, but it really just feels like a pair of shoes that are just a little bit too tight. You ignore it for a while, and then eventually, your foot's overrun with blisters and it's driving you insane. And when I realized that when I was 13, I did a little bit of research about what the trans community looked like. Because I realized that I had never met a trans person in my life. And I had never really met anyone in the LGBTQ+ community in Greenwood, and I was so scared. I was terrified. I didn't think anyone would love me. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I was afraid to tell anybody, and I didn't. To preface, I'm going to talk about some other things. I'm going to talk about some issues with mental health and suicide within my community. And I understand that that's a very difficult subject for some of y'all to hear or talk about. I will not be offended if you find something real interesting over there. But all of this fear and this lack of support from my community led me to take an attempt on my life when I was 13. Bear with me, all this does get happier, I promise. And I am not alone in that. From a report done for the Trevor Project last year, 45% of transgender adolescents considered suicide. 1 in 5 would make an attempt on their life, and that statistic only gets higher when we look at our communities of color, low-income areas, all that kind of things. Now, luckily, that same report also brought to attention that when individuals find just one supportive party in their life, whether that be a parent, a doctor, a teacher, a friend, that their risk for attempting suicide falls by half. Luckily, I was in that statistic. I had the opportunity to find a fabulous therapist. I had a whole team of individuals helping me out. I found a gender specialist that really could help walk me through that and all of those feelings to discuss whether or not transition was even the right option for me. I did that for about 2 years, and then when I was 16, I had the opportunity to start hormone replacement therapy. Very controversial subject in the room. Now, as an individual that started transition under the age of 18, I watch the news a lot, and I get to hear a lot of people's opinions about it. And people talk about it all the time, what it's like starting hormones. And I am here to give you guys a really inside scoop of what that looks like, and it's way more boring than you think. So the first step for a minor attempting to get medical transition is that you need a letter from your therapist. You need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria to essentially give a medical name for all that stuff I was just talking about. Now, once you get a letter from your gender therapist, you have to prove that you have been living as the gender of which you identify with for longer than 2 years. That just means cutting your name, like cutting your hair, changing your name, that kind of thing. Real sweet and simple. Then you take that letter with your consenting parental guardian, and you go to a doctor. Most people in South Carolina, when looking for this, go to Planned Parenthood. We talk about Planned Parenthood a lot. I went to Planned Parenthood. I went to the one in Columbia. When you go to Planned Parenthood, you're going to remember that the protesters outside are not parking attendants, and you should not accept candy from them. Of course, I didn't know that, so my first time at the Planned Parenthood, I was eating my candy in the waiting room. And you're very, very scared. Planned Parenthood is a lovely place, by the way. They're very kind people, very prepared for anything that you bring in. So when you go in, you'll bring in your letter. They'll take your blood work. They'll look over you, make sure that you're healthy, make sure that you're okay. They'll talk to you separately from your guardian to chat with you about what your goals look like, what you want. Everything that you need. Then they will talk to you and your guardian together, preparing you for any kind of complications that you might have, anything like that. Then you leave. Then you wait for them to call you. Then you go back and you have another appointment where they'll take your blood again and you get to do all of that again. And eventually you will get, if it suits, the appropriate dosage for you for what you want and what you need. Then you get to, like the rest of America, wait in an extremely long pharmacy line with folks that work at like a DMV level pace. No offense to anyone who works at the pharmacy. Wow. Now this process, as mundane as it is, was a truly life-saving one for me. Having access to gender-affirming care gives people the opportunity to truly live their lives. It's funny, there are not a lot of things you could go to a therapist for, go to a doctor, and then feel completely fine afterwards. But having the opportunity and having the privilege, really, to pursue transition under the age of 18, I could go off of my antidepressants. I didn't have to do as many therapy appointments. I didn't have as many issues in my life, really. I know that sounds awfully silly, that one thing can fix so much, but it truly matters. Now, why am I talking about this? That's very, very fair. So locally, and really all across the nation, we've been passing bans to make it a federal offense, make it a felony, for my doctor to provide me with the care that I just described. 20 states have passed bans on the subject. That includes North Carolina, Montana, Florida, Alabama. Some places you'd expect, some places you kind of wouldn't. And locally, our local representative, John McCravey, has been championing the Help Not Harm bill to be passed in the House in South Carolina. Now, this bill would make it a felony for anyone under the age of 18, which I feel like on the surface doesn't sound that bad, but most, like most Republican bills, the less you know, the better it sounds. So, doing some research on this, John McCravey keeps citing this source. I noticed when I was tracking this, keeps citing this source that 80% of individuals that pursue transgender affirming or procedures, which makes it sound like surgeries, but really we're talking about hormones here, regret their decision as adults. That is a staggering statistic. That is because it is not true. The actual statistic is less than 1%, and that is just a detransition statistic, which only takes into account individuals that started hormone therapy and stopped. Not whether or not they weren't trans at all. Really, it's just like, were you able to afford it? Was it physically the right option for you? Because you definitely can be trans and not pursue any of that. That is totally allowed. There aren't really rules, to be honest with you. And so, out of curiosity, I was like, well, surely, our community representative wouldn't just lie. So, I emailed John McCravey and I was like, hey, I'm a really interested party. I would really like to know where the statistic is from. If you could please direct me in that area, that would be great. And to his credit, he emailed me back. And he directed me towards a study that was conducted in 1995. I want us to think about that for a second. What science could we think about that is the same now from 1995? In fact, in 1995, our diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria wasn't even created yet. This was just based off of the old criteria, which is not the same. At Lander, we have, when we write research papers, we have to cite studies that were conducted within the last 10 or so years, you know? And, for example, Dr. Walkup, if I cited a study from 1995, would you accept that? No, of course you would. Of course you wouldn't. And so why should we allow our state representatives to make such ill-defended claims that it would result in a failing grade for any local college student in his same district? We shouldn't. We shouldn't. That's the answer. The answer is that we shouldn't. So, the real question is, what can we do about that? What can we do about an attack on my community here where we live? And that's very much the case, because 18 doesn't sound so bad, but in Alabama, they passed the same bill for anyone 19 years and younger, and John McCravey, whom we love, has called for this bill to be extended to 26 and below, which would mean, for me personally, that despite being on hormones for, I'd say, I don't know, like 4 years or something like that, you lose count after a while. It really does become very mundane. I would have to stop my transition in the state of South Carolina for another almost 7 years. that doesn't really make sense. Because if this were really about protecting transgender children, or protecting children in general, we would be using statistics that make sense. Things conducted in the last year. Every major medical association for the US and Canada agree that appropriate gender-affirming care to adolescents under the age of 17 decrease their level of mental anguish. It has a positive impact on their mental health, something that is really a crisis here. Suicide remains to be the leading cause of death for not only trans teens, but teens in general. And it's something that we should be paying attention to. If you haven't really heard much about the Help Not Harm bill, I really can't blame you. There's a lot of things going on in the world, a ton. And some of them probably more directly affect your life than this bill. Because if you don't have a transgender loved one that would be affected by it, or honestly, if you've never met a transgender individual and had a conversation about it at all, why would you notice? If this bill passes, to be honest with you, you may not notice. And that's okay, you shouldn't feel bad about that. But as a transgender individual here, very active in the community, I am making it my responsibility that you do. So if before you got here today and you had never thought to yourself, well, I don't think I've met a transgender individual, I don't think I've met anyone that this bill would affect. None of you could say that because you met me. Congratulations. And if you have any questions about what that looks like, or genuinely, if you have any questions about what the trans experience looks like, and how the community looks, and what the things that we need, please ask me. I am not an expert, and if I can't answer a question, I can definitely give you the name of someone that can. Nor, as a community, are we a monolith, and even if we were, I would not be the elected official. But I will try my best. I'll try my best to connect those communities because there really is a big separation. Trans folks, young folks in general, don't want to come to places like this. Not because we don't believe that you would be supporting and loving, but because we're scared. We have not experienced high levels of social support, and we certainly have not experienced high levels of political support in South Carolina, making it very difficult for folks like myself to want to stand up on a stage like this. So, I mentioned what we could do. Here are some things we can do. I have to leave you on a very good note. First off, we can elect officials that we know will represent all individuals in their county, not just the ones they understand. Shout out to Bill and Jamil, please vote for them. Preaching to the choir here, but please. We can also donate and volunteer to local organizations in the county that really, whilst not on the website, benefit. Places like Beyond Abuse and Meg's House doing their best to help improve the staggering statistics that trans folks and LGBTQ plus individuals are more likely to experience violence, whether that be domestic or they may experience being unhoused from unaccepting areas in homes. So volunteer at your soup kitchen. I'm sure there's someone that'll need your help. Meg's House. I mentioned Beyond Abuse. Planned Parenthood is a great option as well. They always need support. They always need some folks to hand out actual, nice, not ill-willed candy. Oh, also, if you have a young person in your life, regardless of their gender identity or sexual identity or anything of that nature, invite them to coffee. Remind them that they're loved. Remind them that there is absolutely nothing that they could do or be that would deny that love or discredit their vote. Because you never know when that will matter. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To underscore all this, I had just asked Oliver to speak on Sunday. I
did.
called him after
He
church
did.
and I says, hey, I've got an open spot at our breakfast meeting. Would you be interested? He said no, initially. And so I was going to leave it at that, and then he reached out to me. So, what do you want me to talk about? And boy, did I not know what I was getting. I asked for this much and got bountiful. Give me 1 second. Oh. Anybody have questions for Oliver? Or comments?
I will not be offended by any of them, I promise.
What's important to remember for all of us and to tell others about is that every one of us knows at least one person, and probably 3 or 4, who are not comfortable with their birth sexual orientation. And they are all children of God, and they need to be loved and recognized and supported.
Thank you, Barbara.
Oliver, I just want to say thank you for being here. It was very enlightening, and I really appreciate all that you had to say. Thank you.
I appreciate you coming here to listen.
Hi, Oliver. We spoke earlier.
We did.
I wanted him to know that I was so pleased to think that he would have the courage to come before us. It's a very hard thing to stand before people and admit who you truly are from your soul. And we appreciate you, and we thank you, and you keep doing what you're doing.
You said earlier that Lander was a good place for advocacy.
Yes.
Could you speak to that a little bit more, like how so, and yeah, how so?
Oh, this still works. That's awesome. Lander is, okay, so we all know that typically younger folks, they tend to lean a little bit more left. They tend to lean a little bit more Democratic, whether or not we can get in the vote or not, is generally the case. And it's actually so funny how Lander is a really localized area in a very red state, in a very red county. It's a very localized area of very blue folks. Folks that don't believe that their votes matter and they haven't quite gotten that, but they want to. They so deeply have so many opinions that are really wonderful and enlightening if you can get them to speak. And Lander does actually really well. I think that Lander is a very LGBTQ plus friendly place, especially compared to many colleges in the state. And this is also a good place for a lot of different types of advocacy. I'm a part of the Call Me Mr. program, as I mentioned, which was originally designed to get more black men in education, something that we're very, very passionate about. And so we spend a lot of our time and a lot of Lander's money ensuring that every student gets ensuring that every student gets, a teacher that looks like them. And I found that Lander, as even an organization, has been very supportive of efforts like that.
I have a question to ask. Representative McCravey has been touting this activist that he is supportive of, somebody who has regretted their decision. Could you talk a little bit about that person? Sounds like you were aware of that person's message and maybe some of the danger behind it.
Bill's mentioning that I'm aware because he made me aware. So Representative McCravey has been essentially parading a young woman about my age named Chloe, who is one of those, what we call them true detransitioners, which are individuals that began medical transition, stopped, and then also realized that they did align with their birth gender, and that's completely okay. And actually, I didn't mention Chloe because I don't appreciate John McCravey's action of sharing her story and why he's chosen to share her story. I also have absolutely no interest in dragging a young woman who has most likely experienced a lot of the same things that I have experienced, even if her ending goal wasn't the same. And that's completely okay. Those individuals need support. In fact, they need support from both sides. And I'm not going to drag her. That's none of my business. I think that she deserves to be happy in who she is. Every detransitioner deserves to be happy in who, everyone deserves to be happy in who they are. Well, I talk with my hands a lot. It's hard to keep this close to my face. But yeah, I think that would be my response.
Yeah, the danger that I saw was certainly a freedom to share her story and her experience,
Yes.
which is valid. But then when it leads to a representative saying, well, therefore, we need to make that the story for everybody, no exceptions, and I think that's where the danger is.
That is absolutely the case. But we've also realized, the statement I was trying to make with our horribly cited source from John McCravey, that genuinely, I think we might just be looking for resources that fit what we wanted to begin with, which isn't how we should be making legislation. It's not how we conduct science, and it's not how we do anything. So if we can find one person that could fit, and then say this is all of the people, a tactic used in politics since the beginning of forever, I mean, that's where that came from, and that's okay.
Good point. Any final questions? Oh, we have
Oh dear.
a few more.
It's not a question, but I am one of Oliver's teachers.
My favorite teacher.
Isn't that sweet? In the special ed program, I teach in special ed at Lander. And just to let y'all know that Oliver is going to be a great special ed teacher. I am so proud that he is joining our community. I always tell them they're coming to the dark side when they come to special ed because they're stuck there forever, because that's just what we love. And it takes a special kind of person to be in special ed. And I am very proud that Oliver is joining us, and he is going to make a great special ed teacher. If I had kids, I would be great and happy having him as my kids' teacher. Oliver's really become kind of like my kid. My son I never had or wanted, but he's just amazing, and he's so involved, and I do everything I can to help him out, to support him, and he knows that. He knows I love him.
I do. She's wonderful.
I would give a 0 for a cite that from 1995, though. You don't cite a source from 1995. Go ahead.
First of all, I would just want to thank you for being here today and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And then how can we support you and the work you're doing with Rainbow Fellowship?
Oh, that's a terrific question. At Rainbow Fellowship, we've actually gotten pretty used to running independently. Of course, we take donations, but we never ask for them. And I think that a lot of what you could do to support us is what you could do to support trans folks on a global stage and on a state level, which is just helping with all those things I mentioned earlier. I don't remember what I said.
My question is, how does this topic matter with minority groups?
Ooh, that's a really good question. This topic matters a lot because topics like trans violence and mental health issues, and whether or not even getting the opportunity to have affordable health care and mental health services disproportionately affects minority communities, something that we know. Trans folks are they're really no different to that. Trans folks of color are more likely to be unhoused. They're more likely to not even have the opportunity to access care, whether or not it's legal or not. Which means it's why we should care even more, honestly. It's why we should take into account that you hear a lot of trans folks talk, you hear a lot of trans folks that talk and look like me, and that is not the majority of our community. Activism, LGBTQ plus activism, started with brave black women who were willing and to do what I have. Like, the only reason why I'm here is because of those minorities that fought. The only reason why any LGBTQ plus person has the opportunity to talk publicly is because of those individuals of color. And that's something that, you know, we shouldn't forget, and that's something that we have to talk about. Meaning that supporting this community also supports that, and supporting that community also supports this. That's the best part.
All right. Hey, let's give a round of applause again to Oliver. Thank you so much for your time.